In this movie, we will learn how to render using the file export command and the differences between that and the preferred method of output, which is the composition make movie command. Now, if you just want to do a really quick output of your completed animation, you can do a file export and choose one of the export options here. Now, these are only going to highlight if you have your composition selected. So if I'm in my composition window or timeline, then I can go to File Export and choose one of these formats. Now, for instance, let's just pick out QuickTime Movie. Here we have our standard QuickTime export window, and the settings default to the QuickTime standard export. So what I generally do when I'm outputting for QuickTime so that it can be shared with the maximum number of users, both Mac and PC, is I change the settings. First, I would click the Settings button and go to Compression Type and change that to Sorensen Video 3. I change the frame rate to usually half or approximately half of what I've been working at, and I set my keyframes to about every 2 seconds. So in this case it would be every 30 frames. My quality I set to high, and I restrict my data rate to about 550 kilobytes a second. This optimizes the movie for both sophisticated users who have access to a DSL network or a cable modem, but also those who are still on dial-up will be able to download this movie with relative ease. Then I hit OK. Under dimensions, the dimensions that I set are generally 320 by 240 QVGA, and the 320 by 240 is our pixels. I say OK. And then for sound settings, if I'm using music, I would choose the QDesign Music 2, or if I'm using a combination of music and voice, I'll choose the IMA 4:1 codec. Let's use IMA 4:1. The data rate, 44.1 is pretty good, 16-bit mono is best for the web, and I hit OK. And if I'm going to stream this through a web server, I choose Fast Start. In my case, I'd like to email it, so I turn this off. So again, my settings are Sorensen Video 3, high quality, frame rate 15, keyframe rate at 30, bit rate at 550 kilobytes a second. I set my size to 320 by 240, and I don't hit the filter button. And then here under settings for sound, I set it at IMA 4:1, 44:1, and 16-bit. Next, I tell it where to save. Generally, I would have it save into a folder called Renders, and I've saved that right onto the desktop. And I hit Save. And it gives me a basic export window with a start time, duration, and what frame is currently rendering. If I decide to change my mind, I can click Stop. The alternative to the File Export option is to select your composition and go to Composition Make Movie. Now, the Make Movie command is best when we're outputting for Final Cut. So I'm going to call this Mir Akbar 2 FCP, so I know it's for Final Cut. And if I hit the squiggle or tilde key on my keyboard, the render queue or render list shows up. It says that the 20th thing in the list is queued, and I have render settings, output module, and output 2. Again, everything that's underlined with blue lettering can be clicked upon and changed. So first I'm going to click on Best Settings, and I change the field rendering to lower field first for Final Cut. I set the time span for work area only or length of composition. Let's choose length of composition. I say OK, and then I click on Lossless, which is our output module. This controls our audio and video output settings. We don't want to embed a project link. We want it to be a QuickTime movie with no link to our After Effects file. And I want to choose an audio output of 48 kilohertz, 16-bit stereo. That's the DV standard for Final Cut. And I say OK. I keep the caps lock key pressed down to freeze my on-screen previewing, and I hit render. The caps lock key being down prevents the on-screen display of my composition window from previewing every single frame. This allows the computer to devote more processing power to the render. In the end, what I'll have is a render that can be used in Final Cut Pro, or it can be used directly for DVD authoring. For further information on outputting your files and render options, refer to the After Effects Help menu. In the Help menu, you can either type in Render Queue, Rendering, or Exporting, and learn more about your desired output scenario.